During dinner, my grandfather asked, "Did you like the car I gave you as a present last year?" I replied that I hadn't received any car. Then my parents froze, and the truth came to light. My name is Jake. I'm 23 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've always been the son that nobody wanted around. It's not one of those dramatic stories of abandonment or domestic violence. It's worse. It's the story of a family that simply decided I didn't matter enough. My parents, Sarah and Robert, were always very clear about who the favorite was. My sister Madison, 2 years younger, was the princess of the house. She was the one who received the best toys at Christmas. She was the one who got brand name clothes. She was the one who heard words of encouragement when she got mediocre grades at school. I, on the other hand, could come home with a first-place certificate in Math Olympics and receive only a, "That's nice, but don't get cocky about it." I grew up accustomed to comparisons. "Look how affectionate Madison is," my mother would say when I tried to show affection. "See how spontaneous and fun she is," my father would add when I tried to tell some joke or interesting story. It was as if I were a poorly made draft of the person they really wanted as a son. When I finished high school with a 9.2 average and was accepted into 3 different universities, my parents barely looked up from the television. "University is very expensive, Jake," said my mother without even looking at me. "Besides, Madison will need support when her turn comes. She has a bright future ahead." At 18, while my sister got a new laptop to prepare for college entrance exams, I started working at an electronics store in the city mall. It wasn't my dream job, but it paid enough for me to support myself. I organized products, served customers, and sometimes even managed to make some good sales that earned me extra commission. The work was tiring, especially on weekends when the mall got crowded. I'd come home with aching feet and dry hands from handling so many products, but there was a certain dignity in it. I was building something on my own, without depending on anyone. Meanwhile, Madison continued living like a princess. At 20, she had never worked a single day. She spent afternoons at the gym, went out with friends for lunch at expensive restaurants, and always had money to buy whatever she wanted. My parents justified it by saying she was preparing for the job market, and that she was still too young to worry about these things. What intrigued me was where all that money came from. My father worked as an accountant at a small company, and my mother gave private English lessons a few times a week. It didn't seem enough to afford the lifestyle they led, especially considering all of Madison's expenses. The answer came when I was 19. My paternal grandfather William called to talk to me. He had always been different from my parents. When I was a child, he would take me fishing at the river that ran near his house, teach me to fix bicycles in his garage, and always listen to me attentively when I talked about my dreams and plans. "Jake, my boy," he said in that call, "I'm moving to Portugal. I got a good job opportunity there, and I think it'll be good for me to start over." I was sad, but I understood. He had been widowed 2 years ago and maybe really needed a change of scenery. "But don't worry," he continued. "I'll always take care of the family from there. Every month I'll send money to help you all. I want you to be able to study, to have the opportunities you deserve." After he moved, things at home visibly improved. My parents stopped complaining so much about bills. Madison started showing up in even more expensive clothes, and they even renovated the kitchen. When I asked about Grandpa William's money, my mother said he sent an amount every month to help with general household expenses. I didn't question much. After all, I had my job and could manage on my own. But sometimes I wondered if part of that money shouldn't be directed toward me, since Grandpa had specifically mentioned my studies. Contact with my grandfather became sporadic. He would call from time to time, always asking how I was, if I was managing to study, if I needed anything. I always said everything was fine, that I was working and managing on my own. He seemed proud, but also worried. "You've always been a special boy. Jake," he would tell me, "you have a good heart and a determination that few have. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're worth nothing." Those words sustained me on difficult days. When I'd come home tired from work and hear my family making comments about my mediocre job or about how I had no ambition, at least one person in the world believed in me. On my 23rd birthday, to my surprise, I found a small cake on the kitchen table when I got home from work. It wasn't much, one of those supermarket ones with artificial frosting, but it was there. My parents and Madison sang happy birthday, with the same enthusiasm of someone fulfilling a boring obligation. "It's from Grandpa William," my mother explained. "He asked us to organize something for you." I was touched. Even from far away, my grandfather remembered me. It was more than my own family usually did. We ate the cake in silence, each one lost in their own thoughts. and then everyone went back to their normal activities. But in the following weeks, I noticed strange changes. My parents started showing off even more. My mother appeared with a leather purse that cost more than my monthly salary. My father bought a watch that I had seen in a mall window for an absurd price. And Madison was unbearable with her designer clothes and sneakers that cost a fortune. One day, I heard my mother on the phone talking about a trip they were planning. "It'll be just the three of us," she was saying. "A little getaway to relax at the beach. Everything's already booked." When I found out about the trip, I wasn't invited. "There's no room for 4 people in the room," my father explained. "And you have to work anyway, right?" They spent an entire week at a 5-star resort, posting photos on Instagram of expensive meals, colorful drinks, and moments of happy family. I stayed home, working my normal shifts, wondering where all the extra money was coming from. Could it be that Grandpa William was sending more money? Maybe he had gotten a better job in Portugal or received some inheritance. I tried not to think much about it, but curiosity was eating at me. The year passed slowly. My routine continued the same. Work, home, work, home. Sometimes I'd go out with some colleagues for a beer, but in general my social life was limited. I didn't have money for the expensive activities my family did, and I kind of got used to the loneliness. Madison continued without working, living her princess life. My parents continued treating me like I was a burden on the family, and I continued trying to prove I was worth something, even though nobody seemed to notice. When my 24th birthday was approaching, I wasn't expecting anything special. Maybe another cheap cake, maybe not even that. But then, 3 days before the date, my phone rang. "Jake, my boy, how are you?" It was Grandpa William's warm voice, which I hadn't heard in months. "Grandpa, what a surprise!" "I'm well, working hard." Great. Listen, I have news for you. I'm returning to Brazil next week. I want to be there for your birthday." My heart raced. I hadn't seen my grandfather in 3 years, and now he was coming back especially for me? "We'll have dinner at the best restaurant in town," he continued. "Invite your parents and Madison. It'll be a family celebration." I hung up the phone with a smile that hadn't appeared on my face in a long time. Finally, someone who really cared about me would be here. I could barely wait to see Grandpa William again. When I told my family about the visit, the reaction was strange. My parents exchanged nervous glances, and Madison was quieter than usual. "That's good," said my mother, but her voice sounded forced. It'll be good to see Grandpa William again." I didn't understand why they seemed so uncomfortable. After all, it was Grandpa William who was funding their lifestyle. Shouldn't they be anxious to see him? But I didn't think much about it. I was too busy imagining what it would be like to reunite with the only person who had always believed in me. The day finally arrived. My grandfather William showed up at the front door in the middle of the afternoon, with that wide smile I remembered from my childhood. He was thinner, his hair grayer, but he had the same contagious energy as always. "My boy," he said, wrapping me in a tight hug. "How you've grown! You're a grown man." I felt an emotion I hadn't experienced in years. Here was someone who was genuinely happy to see me, who hugged me like I was the most important person in the world. My parents greeted Grandpa William with forced smiles, and Madison barely looked up from her phone. "Come on, family," said my grandfather, clapping his hands. "Today is a day of celebration. I reserved a table at Terraço do Vale." My eyes widened. Terraço do Vale was the fanciest restaurant in town, the kind of place where dishes cost more than I earned in a day of work. During the trip to the restaurant, my grandfather wouldn't stop asking me questions. He wanted to know how work was going, if I was happy, what plans I had for the future. It was the first time in years that someone showed genuine interest in my life. "I'm very proud of you, Jake," he said, putting his hand on my shoulder. "Working hard since you were 18, supporting yourself, that shows character." From the back seat, I heard Madison mutter, "Working at the mall isn't exactly impressive." My father chuckled, and my mother sighed as if she were annoyed. The restaurant was even more elegant than I had imagined. Waiters in impeccable uniforms, tables with linen tablecloths, crystal glasses that sparkled under the candlelight. I felt out of place in my simple shirt and jeans, but my grandfather reassured me. "You look perfect, my boy. True elegance comes from within." The dinner was a surreal experience. The food was incredible, each dish a work of art. My grandfather ordered expensive wine and made sure to include me in all the toasts. For the first time in my life, I felt truly celebrated. But my family was acting strange. My parents spoke little and always seemed nervous when my grandfather asked me any questions. Madison was on her phone the whole time, clearly bored. When they tried to talk, they always ended up making derogatory comments about me. "Another year at the mall, right, Jake?" said Madison with that tone of superiority I knew well. "When are you going to get a real job?" My mother laughed. "Yeah, at your age you should have more ambition." I felt my face heat up with anger and shame, but my grandfather immediately came to my defense. "Ambition? This boy has been working since he was 18. While others his age are spending their parents' money, he's building his independence. That's much more than ambition. It's dignity." The awkwardness at the table was palpable. My parents lowered their eyes, and Madison finally put away her phone. Dessert arrived, a delicious tiramisu that cost more than my lunch for a week. It was then that my grandfather looked at me with that loving smile and asked the question that changed everything. "By the way, Jake, tell me, how was the gift I sent you last year?" I was confused for a moment. "The gift?" "Yes, the birthday gift. Did you like it?" I thought about the cheap cake my parents had bought. "Oh yes, thank you for the cake, Grandpa. It was very thoughtful of you." My grandfather's smile disappeared. He frowned as if something wasn't adding up. "Cake? What cake?" "The cake you asked them to buy for my birthday," I explained, starting to feel a chill in my stomach. "Jake, I didn't ask them to buy any cake," he said, looking directly at my parents. "What's this story?" My mother tried to intervene. "Dad, maybe there was a misunderstanding." "No," said my grandfather, raising his hand. "No misunderstanding. Jake, didn't you receive the car I sent you?" The world stopped. "Car? What car?" "The red Civic I bought and had delivered to your house on your birthday. A brand new car with all the documents in your name." I felt like the ground had disappeared under my feet. I didn't receive any car, Grandpa. Just the cake." The silence at the table was deafening. My parents were pale, and Madison had stopped breathing. My grandfather looked at each of them, and I saw his expression change from confusion to a cold fury I had never seen in him. "Where?" he said, pronouncing each word with dangerous calm. "Is the car I bought for my grandson?" My parents started stammering, trying to make up excuses. My mother said something about delivery problems. My father blamed the transport company. But my grandfather wasn't stupid. He had built a company from scratch. He knew when they were lying to him. "I want the truth," he said, hitting his hand on the table so hard that the glasses trembled. "Now." The entire restaurant was looking at us. Other customers whispered among themselves, discreetly pointing at our table. But I didn't care. I was in total shock. A car? My grandfather had given me a car? It was my mother who finally gave in. With a trembling voice, she confessed, We sold the car." "Sold?" I shouted, unable to control myself. "You sold my car?" "We needed the money," said my father, trying to justify himself. Things were difficult and Madison was needing what? I exploded. More designer clothes, more expensive sneakers, more resort trips? My grandfather was absolutely livid. "You took the gift I bought specifically for Jake and sold it to pay for Madison's luxuries?" "It wasn't just for Madison," my mother tried to defend herself. "It was for the whole family. We took that trip, bought things we needed." "Lies!" I shouted. "I didn't go on the trip. I never saw a cent of that money. You spent it all on yourselves." My grandfather stood up from his chair. 32,000 reais, he said, his voice cutting. "That's what the car was worth. 32,000 reais that I saved working in Portugal to give a decent gift to my grandson. And you sold it to buy frivolities." The amount shocked me even more. 32,000 reais, more than I earned in 2 years working at the mall, and they had sold it like it was nothing. "Dad, please, let me explain," my mother tried, but my grandfather didn't want to hear it. "There's no explanation," he said. "You betrayed my trust. You stole from my grandson, and I'm sure this isn't the first time." He looked at me with an expression of deep sadness. "Jake, my boy, I need to tell you something. That car wasn't the only gift I sent you." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "For the last 3 years, every month I sent specific money for you, for your studies, for your needs, so you could have opportunities. I transferred it to your parents because I trusted they would pass it on to you. But now I understand you never saw any of it." I looked at my parents with a mixture of horror and rage. "How many years?" I asked, my voice hoarse. 3 years, my grandfather replied. 600 reais a month plus household expenses. Money that was rightfully yours. I did the math quickly. 600 rays a month for 3 years. More than 20,000 rays. Added to the 32,000 from the car, they had stolen more than 50,000 rays from me. "You're thieves," I said, with a coldness that surprised me. "Thieves from your own family." Madison finally found her voice. "Jake, don't be dramatic. That money helped the whole family." "It helped you," I corrected. "It helped pay for your clothes, your sneakers, your outings. I never saw a cent. I worked like a slave while you lived like royalty with money that was mine." My grandfather put his hand on my shoulder. "Jake, you're not staying one more day in that house. Come with me to Portugal. There you'll have the opportunities you deserve." I didn't think twice. "When?" "Now. Today. Let's get your things and go to the airport." My parents panicked. "Dad, you can't be serious," said my mother. "He's our son." "Son?" My grandfather laughed bitterly. "You treated this boy like a stranger his whole life. You humiliated him, robbed him, despised him, and now you want to talk about being a son?" He turned to me. "The decision is yours, Jake. You can stay here and continue being treated like garbage, or you can come with me and have the life you always deserved." I looked at my family. My parents were desperate, but not out of love. They were afraid of losing the money my grandfather sent. Madison seemed in shock, finally understanding that her princess life might be coming to an end. "I'm going," I said, standing up from the table. "I have nothing left here." My grandfather smiled for the first time since the truth had been revealed. "Then let's go, my boy. Your new life starts now." When we left the restaurant, leaving my family at the table with the bill to pay, I felt a relief I hadn't experienced in years. Finally, someone had seen the truth. Finally, I had a chance to be valued. "Grandpa," I said as we walked to the car, "thank you for believing in me." "I always believed," he replied, "and now you're going to see what it's like to have a real family." The trip to Portugal was like a dream. My grandfather had bought first-class tickets, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly cared for. During the flight, he told me about the new life that awaited me. "I have a consulting company in Lisbon," he explained. "I started small, but it's grown a lot in recent years. You're going to work with me, learn the business. You have a talent for this. You always did." When we arrived in Lisbon, I was impressed by his house. It was a mansion in an upscale neighborhood with impeccable gardens and a stunning view of the city. But what caught my attention most was the garage. "Choose one," he said, pointing to a row of sports cars. "The one that was yours is no longer there. But any of these can be yours." There was a metallic blue BMW, a gleaming black Audi, and in the corner, a red Porsche that left me breathless. "That one," I said, pointing to the Porsche. "Good choice," my grandfather laughed. "You have good taste." In the first days, I still couldn't believe the change. I had a room bigger than my parents' living room, a closet full of clothes my grandfather had ordered, and most importantly, I had respect. My grandfather consulted me about company decisions, valued my opinions, treated me as an equal. The work at the consulting firm was challenging, but rewarding. I dealt with important clients, made complex analyses, and felt that I was finally using my potential. My salary was 10 times higher than what I earned at the mall, and for the first time in my life, I had money to do whatever I wanted. But the most important thing was the sense of belonging. My grandfather introduced me to friends as my grandson, the future of the company. He was proud of me, and that made all the difference. During the first months, my phone rang constantly. They were calls from Brazil, from my parents, and Madison. I ignored them all. I had nothing to talk about with them. They had robbed me, humiliated me, treated me like trash for years. Now that they no longer had my grandfather's money, they wanted to talk. My grandfather told me he had cut off all financial support the day after our departure. "They made their bed," he said. "Now let them sleep in it." 6 months later, curiosity finally won. One night, after a particularly good day at work, I decided to answer one of the calls. It was my mother. "Jake, thank God. Are you okay?" "We were worried." I almost laughed. "Worried? What do you want?" "We want to talk, son. You're our family. We miss you here." "Family." I repeated the word like it was poisonous. "Where was that family when I needed it? Where was it when you sold my car to pay for Madison's princess life?" "Jake, please let me explain. We're going through difficulties. Without your grandfather's money, things got very difficult. They're going to evict us next week." Now I really laughed. "And what does that have to do with me?" "You're our son. You have an obligation to help us. Obligation? What obligation do I have to you? You treated me like trash my whole life. Now you want me to be the good son who helps the family? I heard my mother start to cry. Please, Jake, we know we made mistakes, but we're your family. You can't leave us on the street. You left me on the street emotionally my whole life, I replied. Now experience what it's like literally. My father took the phone. Jake, stop this ingratitude. After everything we did for you, everything you did for me, I exploded. You stole more than 50,000 Rs from me. You sold my car. You humiliated me. You treated me like I was a burden. And now you come talking about ingratitude? We raised you, gave you a house, food. You gave me the minimum required while giving the maximum to Madison. Don't come asking me for gratitude now. I heard a third voice. It was Madison. Jake, you're being dramatic. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad? I almost screamed. You spent the money that was mine on designer clothes for you. You went traveling and left me out. You mocked me every day. But now you have a good life. You don't need to be resentful. I have a good life despite you, not because of you. And you know what else? I'm happy knowing you're in misery. Finally, you're paying for what you did. My mother came back to the phone sobbing. Please, Jake, we're your family. You can't abandon us like this. You abandoned me first, I replied. The difference is that now I have a choice, and I choose to have nothing to do with you. But we're your parents. Real parents don't do what you did. Real parents don't steal from their children. Real parents don't humiliate their children to elevate others. There was a long silence. Then my mother said, What if we ask for forgiveness? Forgiveness doesn't bring back the years of humiliation. Forgiveness doesn't bring back the money you stole. Forgiveness doesn't erase the pain you caused. So you're going to leave us on the street? I'm not the one leaving you on the street. It was your choices that led you to this. You could have used Grandpa's money responsibly. You could have included me in the family. You could have treated me with respect. But you chose to humiliate and steal. Now deal with the consequences. My father tried one last card. And Madison? She's not to blame for any of this. Not to blame? I laughed with contempt. She participated in every humiliation. She laughed at me, called me a failure, took advantage of every cent of the money that was mine. She's as guilty as you are. But she's your sister. Sister is someone who stands by your side, who supports you. Madison was never my sister. She was just a stranger who shared the same house. I heard Madison scream in the background. I always hated you anyway. You were always a burden on this family. Perfect, I said, calmly. Finally, the truth. Thank you for confirming everything I always knew. My mother came back to the phone, desperate. Jake, please. At least give us a chance to redeem ourselves. You had 23 years of chances. You wasted them all. But now it's different. We understand our mistakes. You only understood when the money ran out. If Grandpa was still sending money, you wouldn't have even called me. There was another silence. I had hit the nail on the head. You know what makes me most angry? I continued. It's not even the money. It's the fact that you never really loved me. I was just an inconvenience you tolerated. And now, when you need something, you want to pretend I'm a son. We do love you, said my mother. No, you love the idea of what I can do for you now. It's different. I hung up the phone and put it on silent. I didn't want to hear their pathetic pleas anymore. My grandfather, who had heard part of the conversation, put his hand on my shoulder. How do you feel? Free, I replied. And it was true. For the first time in my life, I feel truly free. In the following weeks, my grandfather told me what was happening in Brazil. The family had been evicted and was living in a tiny apartment in a dangerous neighborhood. My father had gotten a job at a factory earning minimum wage. My mother was cleaning houses to supplement the income. And Madison, who had never worked a day in her life, had to accept a job at a coffee shop. They're paying for years of arrogance, said my grandfather. They always thought they were better than everyone else, that they deserved a life of luxury without working for it. I felt deep satisfaction knowing they were finally facing reality. It wasn't revenge, it was justice. My new life in Portugal prospered more each day. My grandfather taught me everything about the business, and I discovered I had a natural talent for it. Within a year, I was already managing important accounts and contributing significantly to the company's success. I met incredible people, made true friends, even started dating a colleague from the company, Sophia, who treated me with the respect and affection I had never experienced before. "You're a special person. Jake," she would tell me, "you have an inner strength that's admirable." Sometimes I would tell her about my childhood, about how my family treated me. She would be horrified. "How can parents treat a child like that? It's incomprehensible." "Because they never saw me as a real son," I would explain. "I was just an accident they tolerated." 2 years after my departure, my phone rang again. It was a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, I heard my mother's voice. "Jake, it's me. Please don't hang up. How did you get this number?" "I asked an investigator to find you." "Jake, please, I need to tell you something important." Against my better judgment, I listened. "Madison is sick. Cancer. She needs treatment, but we don't have money. She could die." I felt a knot in my chest, but not of pity. It was anger. "And what does that have to do with me? She's your sister. Even with all the problems, she's family." "No, she's not. She chose not to be when she spent years humiliating me." "Jake, please, she's sorry. She wants to talk to you." "I'm not interested. How can you be so cold? It's a matter of life and death. She had a whole lifetime to treat me like a brother. She chose not to do that. Now, in the hour of need, she wants me to forget everything? But she's family. Family is someone who's by your side in good times and bad. Family is someone who supports you, loves you, respects you. You were never my family. You were just people who shared the same house with me." I heard sobs from the other side of the line. "Jake, I know we made mistakes. We all made mistakes. But please don't let your sister die." "She's not my sister," I repeated. "And even if she were, you taught me that family doesn't help family. After all, when I needed help, where were you?" I hung up the phone and never answered calls from that country again. 3 years passed. My life in Portugal was perfect. I had married Sophia, we bought a beautiful house in the center of Lisbon, and I had become a partner in my grandfather's company. We were rich, respected, happy. On a quiet Sunday, my grandfather called me to talk. "Jake, I have something to tell you. I received a call from Brazil yesterday." My stomach contracted. "About what?" "Madison died last week. Cancer." I felt nothing. Neither sadness nor relief. Just a neutral emptiness. "How are they?" "Destroyed. Your father had a heart attack after the funeral and is in the hospital. Your mother is alone with no money for anything." I was silent for a long time. "Do you feel anything?" asked my grandfather. "No," I replied honestly. "Should I?" "There's no right or wrong here, Jake. They made choices. You made yours. They could have had a good life if they had treated me like family. They could have used the money you sent wisely. They could have created an environment of love at home. But they chose the path of humiliation and favoritism." My grandfather nodded. "And now they're paying the price." "I don't feel sorry," I said. "I feel that justice was finally done." That night, I told Sophia everything. She hugged me tight. "You did the right thing," she said. "Family isn't who shares DNA with you. Family is who loves you, respects you, stands by your side. Your grandfather is your family. I am your family." She was right. I looked around. My beautiful house, my wonderful wife, my grandfather who loved me unconditionally, my prosperous company, and I realized I had found my true family. People who valued me, who believed in me, who treated me with respect and affection. That's what family really meant. My mother tried to contact me a few more times over the years, always with some new tragedy, always asking for help. I never responded. I had closed that chapter of my life forever. Today, at 28, I am a fulfilled man. I have a prosperous company, a family that loves me, true friends. I learned that sometimes to find happiness, you need to have the courage to leave behind toxic people, even if they share your blood. My grandfather William saved me, not just financially, but emotionally. He showed me what it's like to be truly loved, what it's like to have someone proud of you, what it's like to be part of a real family. And as for my biological family, well, they reaped exactly what they sowed. For years, they sowed contempt, humiliation, and selfishness. It was natural that they would reap loneliness, poverty, and regret. I feel no remorse. I feel gratitude for having had the strength to get out of that toxic situation and build a life based on true love and mutual respect. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is have the courage to abandon those who don't deserve you, even if they're family. Because true family is choice, not obligation. And I chose well.
During a dinner, my parents said they would leave the entire inheritance to my spoiled brothers, so I stopped paying their bills, but they forgot that the house mortgage was about to expire. My name is Sarah. I'm 35 years old and work as a supervising nurse at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, one of the largest and most respected hospitals in Chicago. For years, I believed I had a normal family, with the typical challenges of any American family. I never imagined that my life would change completely because of a simple phone call on a rainy October afternoon. I was in my office, finishing the shift reports and reviewing next week's schedules, when my cell phone rang. The name Mom appeared on the screen, which was already strange. She normally only called on Sundays for our mandatory weekly conversation, or when she needed something urgent. "Sarah, dear." Her voice sounded different, more formal and careful than usual. "I need you to come have dinner here at home next Friday. It's very important that you be present." She made a significant pause before adding, "I'm going to make your favorite chicken lasagna, the one with the special sauce you always asked for when you were a child." That caught me completely off guard. Chicken lasagna with special sauce? She hadn't made that in at least 5 years. Since I graduated in nursing and started working irregular shifts, our family meetings became rare, and when they happened, usually ended in tension. Mainly because my twin brothers, David and Mark, 28 years old, always found a way to turn any family reunion into some kind of drama or request for financial help. "What kind of important, Mom?" I asked, already mentally imagining all the possibilities. Maybe my father was sick. Maybe one of the twins had gotten into some financial trouble more serious than usual. Or maybe they needed money for some new crazy get-rich-quick scheme. "You'll find out on Friday. Just show up, okay? At 7 o'clock sharp. It's really important for the whole family." Her tone left me deeply uneasy. There was something definitive in that voice, as if she was about to announce something irreversible and had already made all the necessary decisions. It was the tone she used when I was a teenager and had broken some important rule. Formal, a little distant, but decided. I agreed to go, more out of growing curiosity than real desire to spend an entire evening with my family. The last few years had been progressively more difficult in terms of family dynamics. Since my father retired from the auto parts factory where he worked for 30 years, and my mother stopped working as a secretary at a local school, I had been helping financially consistently. It wasn't a fortune, $500 monthly transferred directly to their joint account, but it made a significant difference in the limited retirement budget they had. Besides, I paid for my father's additional health insurance, which cost $200 monthly, and occasionally helped with necessary house repairs, emergency bills, and expensive gifts on birthdays and holidays. It was my silent and constant way of giving back everything they did for me during my childhood and education. Well, at least that's what I told myself. Actually, when I stopped to think honestly about it, I realized that the treatment I received during my youth wasn't exactly equal to what my brothers received. While I worked part-time at McDonald's since I was 16 to pay for my own clothes, school supplies, and small luxuries, David and Mark received generous allowances of $50 weekly without needing to work or do anything beyond basic household chores. When they turned 18, each one got a used but fully functional car, a Honda Civic for David and a Toyota Corolla for Mark. I, on the other hand, drove my mother's 1998 Honda Civic until I could save enough money to buy my own car at 22, after 2 years working as a registered nurse. During college, while I worked as a nursing assistant on weekends and did night shifts to pay tuition and books, my parents fully paid for the experimental courses that David took. First graphic design, then photography, then digital marketing. Mark had similar treatment, with my parents funding his attempts at physical education, then nutrition, then a technical course in automotive mechanics that he dropped out of halfway through. But I tried not to think too much about these disparities. Families are complicated, I told myself. Maybe my parents just wanted to teach me independence from an early age. Maybe they knew I was more capable of managing on my own. Maybe it was even a compliment to my character. On Friday, I arrived punctually at 7 at the 2-story house in Oak Park where I grew up. The house was impeccable, as always happened when my mother wanted to impress someone or mark a special occasion. Every surface gleamed, there were vanilla-scented candles lit in the dining room, and the unmistakable smell of chicken lasagna hung in the air, mixed with the aroma of homemade garlic bread. David and Mark were already in the living room, sitting on the brown leather sofa like two princes waiting for a royal audience. David, the more extroverted of the two, worked sporadically as a freelance graphic designer, always complaining that clients didn't understand his artistic vision or didn't pay what his work was really worth. Mark had tried various professions in the last 10 years: insurance salesman, personal trainer, administrative assistant, even a questionable period selling dietary supplements online through a multi-level marketing scheme. Neither of them had managed to stabilize professionally or financially. "Hi, Sarah." Mark greeted me with a smile that seemed too forced and too wide. "You look great. Is work at the hospital going well? I heard you might be promoted to nursing manager soon." I responded politely, thanking him for the question and confirming that there were some interesting opportunities on the professional horizon. I noticed that both seemed more dressed up than normal. David had even shaved and cut his hair, something that hadn't happened in months. Mark was wearing a dress shirt I hadn't seen in years. Definitely something important was happening. During dinner, the conversation flowed in a strangely harmonious and artificial way. My parents asked in detail about my work, about the interesting patients I had recently attended to, about my career plans. I asked about the twins' current projects, and to my surprise, both had relatively substantial answers. David had gotten a new client for website design. Mark was considering going back to school to become a radiology technician. Everyone laughed at my father's predictable jokes about retirement and about how he didn't miss the 5 a.m. alarm. My mother served wine, an expensive bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon that normally only appeared on very special occasions. It was almost normal, almost like a truly functional and harmonious family. It was when we finished dessert, an elaborate and clearly expensive tiramisu bought from the sophisticated Italian bakery downtown, that my mother coughed delicately and exchanged a significant look with my father. "Well, children," she began, using the infantilizing term that always irritated us for being all adults graduated for more than a decade. "Your father and I have very important news to share with you today." My father straightened up in his chair, assuming that formal and solemn posture he used when he wanted to seem important and authoritative. After much consideration and several conversations with our lawyer, we officially finalized our will this week. The atmosphere at the table changed instantly and dramatically. I felt my stomach contract involuntarily, an uncomfortable and growing sensation that something very bad was about to happen. David and Mark, I noticed, didn't seem surprised. In fact, they exchanged a quick look that suggested they already knew what was coming. After much careful thought, my mother continued, smiling proudly in the direction of the twins, we decided to leave both the house and the vacation apartment in Wisconsin exclusively to David and Mark. The words echoed in my head like a distorted and surreal echo. The house where I grew up, where I spent all my childhood and adolescence, where I took care of my parents when they got sick, where I studied until late at night to get the partial scholarship for nursing school. The apartment in Wisconsin where our family spent 2 months every summer, where I taught my younger brothers to swim and ride bicycles, where I worked as a lifeguard for 3 consecutive summers during school vacations to help with family expenses. "You'll do very well dividing everything equally between you," my father added, addressing exclusively the twins as if I wasn't present at the table. "The house is valued at approximately $200,000 by the current market, and the apartment is worth about $150,000. It'll give you both a solid and secure foundation to start your real adult lives." I opened my mouth, but no sound managed to come out. David and Mark continued exchanging satisfied and complicit looks, as if this decision had been discussed and approved by them long before this night. "And me?" I finally managed to ask, my voice sounding strange and distant even to myself. My mother looked at me with that condescending and paternalistic expression I knew very well since adolescence. It was the same look she used when I questioned why my brothers could come home later, or why they received bigger allowances, or why I had to work to pay for my own clothes while they got expensive clothes as gifts. "Sarah, dear," she said with a tone that tried to be gentle but sounded clearly patronizing, "you have a solid and well-established career. You earn an excellent salary at the hospital, have your own beautiful apartment in Lincoln Park, your own car, your own independent life. You clearly don't need our help or financial support. The boys are still finding their way in life," my father completed, using the phrase I had heard countless times during the last decade. "They need more support and stability than you, who have already established yourself professionally and financially. Finding their way." At 28 years old, after an entire decade of finding their way at the expense of other people's hard work and financial sacrifices, at the expense specifically of my hard work and my financial sacrifices, I felt my face burn with a combination of anger, humiliation, and absolute disbelief. The brutal irony of the situation hit me like a direct punch to the stomach. I was being deliberately punished and excluded exactly for having been responsible, hardworking, and independent, for having built a stable life through years of sacrifice and dedication. It was as if all my years of hard work, all the nights I spent studying instead of going out with friends, All the weekends I worked instead of relaxing had been a gigantic strategic mistake. Let me understand this correctly, I said, struggling to keep my voice controlled and civilized. You're completely excluding me from the family inheritance because I was too responsible? Because I worked too hard? Because I became too independent? It's not exactly like that, Sarah, my mother sighed, as if I were a stubborn child who couldn't understand simple concepts. It's just that you already have everything you need. You don't need us. It's just that you want to continue subsidizing and supporting two adult men of almost 30 years who have never assumed real responsibility for anything in their entire lives. The words came out harsher and more cutting than I initially intended, but I discovered I couldn't contain myself. 20 years of repressed frustration were beginning to leak. David finally decided to participate in the conversation. Sarah, this really isn't about you personally. It's about family justice and equity. You were always the academic favorite, always had more facility with studies and work. You were always more capable than us. Facility? I laughed, but there was absolutely no humor in that sound. It was a bitter and incredulous laugh. Facility? David, do you remember me studying until 2 or 3 in the morning every day throughout high school? Do you remember me working 40 hours a week while attending nursing school full-time? That wasn't facility. That was hard work and constant sacrifice. Mark tried to assume the role of mediator and ease the situation. Look, Sarah, it doesn't need to be this dramatic. When the time comes, which we sincerely hope is many years from now, we obviously will divide everything equally among the 3 of us. Of course you'll receive your fair share. Oh, what extraordinary generosity, I responded with heavy sarcasm. You'll graciously give me 1/3 of the inheritance that originally should have been automatically and equally divided among 3 children. What kindness. What fraternal magnanimity. The embarrassing and heavy silence took over the dining table. I could feel the tension growing exponentially. My father, clearly irritated with the direction the conversation was taking, hit his closed fist on the table forcefully, making all the plates, glasses, and silverware clatter alarmingly. Enough of this discussion. This decision is already made and finalized. You are our family and will respect and accept our final will. Period. Something fundamental inside me broke at that specific moment. It wasn't exactly anger. It was something colder, more calculated, more definitive. A crystalline and implacable clarity about exactly where I was positioned in the hierarchy and priorities of this family. For 20 years, I had been the obedient daughter, the one who helped financially, the one who solved problems, the one who made silent sacrifices for the common family good. And my reward for 2 complete decades of dedication had been being summarily cut from the family inheritance. You know something? You're absolutely right, I said, calmly getting up from my chair. I really am too independent. So extraordinarily independent that I no longer need to financially support a family that clearly doesn't value me or consider me worthy of equal treatment. Sarah, what exactly are you trying to say with that? My mother asked. And for the first time that entire evening, I detected a genuine tone of concern and alarm in her voice. I mean very simply that, if I'm too independent to receive family inheritance, then you're also too independent to receive my charity and continued financial assistance. I picked up my purse and coat, deliberately heading for the front door. The $500 monthly I transferred to you, Dad's additional health insurance that costs $200 a month, the expensive house repairs, the birthday and holiday gifts, absolutely everything ends today. You can't be serious about this, David said, finally seeming genuinely alarmed and worried. I'm more than serious. If you don't consider me family enough for inheritance, I don't consider you family enough for continued charity. Sarah, dear, please let's sit down and talk about this like civilized adults, my mother desperately tried, quickly getting up from her chair. There's absolutely nothing to talk about or negotiate. You made crystal clear and unequivocally what exactly my place and value in this family is. I opened the front door forcefully. Good luck finding another person willing to financially sponsor the spoiled boys and eternal teenagers. Sarah Elizabeth, come back here right now, my father shouted with his most authoritative voice. But I was already determinedly going down the porch steps, walking with firm steps toward my car. I could hear agitated and increasingly loud voices coming from inside the house, but I didn't turn around for even a second. I didn't look back. For 20 complete years, since I started working at 15 years old, I had consistently been the responsible daughter, the one who helped without questioning, the one who solved family financial problems, the one who made personal sacrifices for the common good. And my official reward for 2 entire decades of unquestionable dedication had been being deliberately cut from the family inheritance because I was too independent. Well, if they wanted a real and complete demonstration of absolute independence, I was about to give exactly that. During the entire trip back to my apartment, my mind was working at an accelerated pace, processing not only the anger and humiliation, but also the practical implications of everything that had just happened. It wasn't just about the money, although $350,000 in properties wasn't exactly a despicable amount. It was fundamentally about the underlying principle. It was about the fact that my own parents had consciously reduced me to a convenient money-making machine, useful for solving emergency financial problems, but not worthy of being treated as a true family heir. I arrived at my apartment in Lincoln Park, a modest but comfortable and cozy place I had bought 3 years before with much sacrifice and careful financial planning, and immediately grabbed my laptop. If I was really going to do this, I would do it completely and definitively. First measure: immediately cancel the automatic monthly transfer of $500 to my parents' joint account. I accessed my online bank account and, with a few decisive clicks, canceled the scheduled transfer. Done. Second measure: call the insurance company on Monday morning to remove my father from the supplemental health policy I paid monthly. This would represent an immediate savings of $200 monthly for me and a new expense of $200 monthly for them. Third measure: meticulously review all other expenses related to my extended family. Expensive birthday and holiday gifts, the elaborate Christmas dinner I always offered and paid for in full, the professional gardening service I hired for them the previous year when my father started complaining about back pains. Absolutely everything would be permanently cut. My phone rang 3 times during that long and agitated night. I didn't answer any of the calls. In the following 3 weeks, I maintained an absolute and impenetrable silence. I didn't answer phone calls, didn't return text messages or voicemails, didn't show up for the usual and mandatory Sunday visit. It was as if I had simply disappeared completely from their lives and reality. At work, I concentrated and dedicated myself more intensely than ever. I took extra shifts whenever possible, enthusiastically volunteered for special and challenging projects, talked in detail with my supervisor about concrete opportunities for growth and promotion. If I was going to be really and completely independent, it would be in the best possible way and with maximum professional success. It was during one of these productive weeks that I received casual but interesting information. My colleague Jennifer, who worked in the hospital's administrative finance department, mentioned during our usual coffee break that her younger brother was a real estate broker specialized exclusively in investment and rental properties. "Have you ever seriously considered investing in real estate, Sarah?" she asked while we drank coffee. "With the stable income you have, your excellent credit score, and your proven professional stability, you would be an absolutely perfect candidate for investment property financing." The conversation planted an intriguing and promising seed in my mind. While my family was probably starting to painfully feel the absence of my $500 monthly dollars, I was saving and accumulating that money for the first time in many years. Along with all the money I didn't spend on expensive gifts and constant family favors, I had a considerable and growing financial amount rapidly accumulating in my savings account. But the real dramatic turnaround came on a gray Thursday afternoon, exactly 3 weeks and 2 days after the disastrous dinner, when my phone rang persistently in the middle of my shift at the hospital. It was my mother calling, and when I finally answered, more out of curiosity than any desire for reconciliation, her voice sounded completely different from anything I had ever heard before. No longer condescending or controlling as always. She sounded genuinely desperate, vulnerable, and scared. "Sarah," she said, and I could clearly hear that she was crying. "Please, I beg you, I need to talk to you urgently. It's a real family emergency." "Mom," I responded calmly, pausing my review of medical records to give full attention to the call. "What specifically happened?" "Sarah, dear, we are facing very serious financial problems." Her trembling and broken voice immediately told me everything I needed to know about the severity of the situation. "The electric bill arrived yesterday, and it's $420 that we simply can't pay. Your father's supplemental health insurance expired 2 weeks ago, and they're charging $800 for the overdue month, plus penalties. And Mark's monthly car payment?" She made a long and embarrassing pause. "Mark's car payment is 3 weeks overdue, and they're threatening to repossess the vehicle." It was interesting and revealing how the real financial consequences arrived so quickly when you stopped being the family's personal bank and private charity source. "And?" I asked deliberately, keeping my voice neutral and emotionless. Well, we never really realized or calculated how much you helped us financially every month. The boys haven't been able to find stable work yet, And your father's limited retirement barely manages to cover the basic house mortgage and essential survival expenses. Wait a moment. Mortgage? Current and active mortgage? Mom, haven't you completely paid off the house yet? I asked, genuinely shocked. My father had worked faithfully at the auto parts factory for 30 complete years. They had lived in that same house for more than 20 years. How was it possible they still owed significant money? A long and extremely embarrassing silence from the other side of the line gave me the answer before she even spoke. Well, we refinanced the mortgage several times over the years. To make necessary improvements to the house, to help the boys with some difficult financial situations, to cover some medical emergencies. Her voice became progressively lower and more ashamed, and now the final deadline for settlement is approaching very rapidly. What deadline exactly? The mortgage? Sarah. The absolute final deadline for total settlement is in exactly 2 weeks. If we can't pay the $68,000 remaining from the outstanding balance, the bank will execute the mortgage and take legal possession of the house. I almost let the phone slip from my hand. $68,000? How the hell did they manage to accumulate a mortgage debt of $68,000 on a house they originally bought for less than $100,000 2 decades ago? How exactly did you get to this financial situation? I asked, now genuinely shocked and curious about the extent of fiscal irresponsibility. It was several small and medium things over many years. The emergency loan of $15,000 for David's new car when he had that accident, and insurance didn't cover everything. The money for Mark's failed attempt to open the personal training business, which cost $12,000 in equipment. The complete kitchen renovation that cost $25,000. The special vacation to Europe we took to celebrate our 30th wedding anniversary. Each individual item on the list sounded like another elaborate justification for impulsive and irresponsible spending. The complete reality of the situation was becoming crystalline and disturbing. While I meticulously saved every penny and worked exhaustive extra shifts to build my financial independence, my parents had systematically mortgaged and compromised their financial future to indefinitely subsidize my brother's irresponsible and parasitic lifestyle. And the boys can't contribute or help financially? I asked, already knowing perfectly the answer that would come. Sarah, you know very well they don't have available money. David can barely pay the basic rent for his tiny apartment. And Mark is living here at home again since he lost his part-time job at the local gym. Of course. Mark was living back at his parents' house, probably occupying my old childhood room, using my old study desk, sleeping in my old bed. Mom, I said very carefully, choosing each word with precision, are you calling me specifically because you want me to pay the $68,000 mortgage in full? We would very much like to discuss some available options and financial possibilities. Options. As if I were a commercial banking institution and they were formally negotiating terms for a business loan. And what would be exactly my concrete guarantee that this catastrophic financial situation won't repeat itself again in the near future? I asked directly. What do you mean, dear? What do you mean? Mom, you literally deliberately cut me from the family inheritance less than a month ago. Now you want me to deposit $68,000 to save properties that I officially will never inherit? Another embarrassing and revealing silence. Sarah, about the will. Maybe we can reconsider and talk about that decision too. Finally, we were getting to the truly interesting point of the conversation. Talk specifically how. Well, maybe we were a bit hasty and unfair. Maybe we can find a more balanced solution that works adequately for the whole family. I leaned back calmly in my chair at my office in the hospital, watching through the window the constant movement of the city below. People came and went hurriedly on the sidewalks, each dealing with their own personal crises, important decisions, and moments of choice. It was fascinating how perspective and negotiating power changed completely when you were on the side that had financial control and decision-making capacity. What specific type of solution do you have in mind? I asked carefully. We can change the will again. Maybe include you also in the inheritance, in a more fair and balanced way. Include, as if it were an extraordinarily generous concession on their part, not my fundamental birthright as a daughter. Mom, let me understand perfectly the proposal you're making. You want me to pay $68,000 immediately to save properties that you may or may not decide to leave me someday in the distant future. It's not exactly like that. It's precisely like that. I interrupted her firmly. You had 3 complete weeks to carefully reflect on your original decision. 3 entire weeks to realize that maybe you made a fundamental error in judgment. And now you're only considering including me again in the inheritance because you discovered you desperately need my money. Sarah, we are your family. True families help each other unconditionally. True families also respect and value all members equally from the beginning. You made absolutely clear that you don't consider me equal in value to my brothers. I made a long and deliberate pause, letting the full weight of the words settle completely. But I will help you, I said finally, surprising even myself. I could hear the immediate and palpable relief in her accelerated breathing. But I have one specific and completely non-negotiable condition. What condition? I want both properties, both the house in Oak Park and the vacation apartment in Wisconsin, to be transferred completely and exclusively to my personal name in the will. Not divided between siblings, not shared in percentages. Entirely mine, with absolute legal documentation. Sarah, that really wouldn't be fair to your brothers? Fair? I laughed, but it definitely wasn't a cheerful or good-humored sound. You're seriously talking about family justice and equity? What specific part of arbitrarily cutting me from the inheritance was fair? What part of using me as a personal bank and charity source for years was fair? What part of treating your children unequally was fair? But the boys would be left with nothing. The boys are adult men of 28 years who urgently need to learn to support themselves independently. And you, as parents, need to learn that deliberate actions have real and permanent consequences. I made another strategic pause, letting the proposal settle completely in her mind. These are my final and non-negotiable conditions. Both properties legally transferred to my exclusive name, official documentation signed and registered by tomorrow at 5 in the afternoon, and then, and only then, I will make the bank transfer of $68,000 to save the house. Or you find the $68,000 somewhere else. Sarah, you can't be completely serious about this. This proposal would leave your brothers completely without inheritance. My brothers already had guaranteed inheritance until 3 weeks ago, and I had absolutely nothing. Now I'm offering them exactly the same thing you generously offered me. Nothing. The tense silence from the other side of the line extended for almost 2 complete minutes. I could perfectly imagine the urgent and whispered conversation that was happening in my parents' kitchen. I need to talk immediately with your father and the boys about this proposal, she said finally, her voice sounding defeated and resigned. You have exactly until tomorrow at 5 in the afternoon, I repeated with absolute clarity. After that deadline, you can consider my offer permanently withdrawn. I hung up the phone calmly and leaned back deeply in my chair, my heart beating accelerated with pure adrenaline. I had just made the biggest power play of my entire life, and there was no way to go back. The next 48 hours were a true intense festival of family drama. My phone rang practically incessantly. First David with a long and emotional call, then Mark trying a different approach, then my father with his most authoritative voice, and finally my mother again with a completely different tone. I deliberately let all the calls go straight to voicemail, but I listened to each message carefully. David left a 15-minute message, long and deeply emotional, talking about how I was being cruel, vindictive, and destroying the family bonds that took decades to build. Mark tried the classic approach of subtle emotional manipulation, talking nostalgically about our shared childhood, eternal fraternal bonds, and how our family had always helped each other through difficult times. My father was characteristically direct and to the point. Sarah, you're being absolutely ridiculous and childish. Call back immediately so we can talk like civilized and responsible adults. But it was my mother's final message on the second night that really impressed me deeply. Her voice was controlled, carefully measured, and completely resigned. Sarah, dear, your father and I talked extensively yesterday and today with David and Mark. We also consulted Mr. Harrison, our lawyer. You won completely. The lawyer will come here tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon to change the will exactly as you demanded. Both properties will be transferred legally and exclusively to your personal name. Please call back so we can arrange all the technical details of the bank transfer. 1. As if this entire situation were a strategic chess game and not a fundamental question of family dignity. Mutual respect and equal treatment. The next day, I purposely left the hospital early and drove directly to my parents' house in Oak Park. The atmosphere was tense and charged when I entered through the front door. David and Mark were sitting rigidly on the living room sofa, like 2 punished teenagers awaiting punishment. My parents seemed to have visibly aged years in just a few weeks. There were new wrinkles around my mother's eyes, and my father had a hunched posture I had never noticed before. Mr. Harrison, the family lawyer for more than 15 years, was visibly uncomfortable and embarrassed with the entire situation. He was a distinguished 60-year-old man who had known our family since I was in college, and clearly wasn't accustomed to mediating such intense and emotionally charged family disputes. Sarah, he said when he formally greeted me at the entrance, I have the professional obligation to ask if you're absolutely certain about these testamentary changes. It's a very definitive and far-reaching decision. I have absolute and unwavering certainty, I responded calmly, maintaining direct eye contact. During the following hour, we meticulously reviewed all the necessary legal documents. The will was completely reformulated and rewritten, placing both properties, the house in Oak Park and the apartment in Wisconsin, exclusively and integrally in my personal name. Each paragraph was read aloud. Each clause was explained in detail. Each legal implication was completely clarified. When it finally came time for the official signatures, I could see genuine tears shining in my mother's eyes. She tried to discreetly wipe them with a tissue, but the emotion was obvious and palpable. "Ready and finalized," Mr. Harrison solemnly announced, carefully storing all documents in his leather briefcase. "Everything is completely legal, registered, and official." At that exact moment, I took my phone and accessed my online bank account. With a few deliberate touches on the screen, I initiated an electronic transfer of $68,000 directly to the mortgage company's account. The payment was processed and confirmed in real time. "Done," I calmly announced to the entire room. "The mortgage is completely paid off. You won't lose the house." The instant and palpable relief on my parents' faces was almost physically visible, as if a gigantic weight had been suddenly removed from their shoulders. But David, who had remained silent during the entire process, finally exploded in contained fury. "Congratulations, Sarah. You got exactly what you wanted from the beginning. I sincerely hope you're happy and satisfied for having deliberately destroyed your own family." "I didn't destroy absolutely anything," I responded with unshakable calm. "I simply applied the exact same logic you originally used with me. If I didn't deserve inheritance for being too independent, then you don't deserve to own properties for being too dependent." Mark, always the more diplomatic of the twins, tried one last desperate emotional card. "Sarah, we're your blood brothers. That has to mean something important and lasting." "It does, and a lot. It means that when the appropriate time comes, which I sincerely hope is many, many healthy years from now, I will personally decide what to do with these properties. Maybe I'll be more generous and egalitarian than you were with me. Maybe not. That will depend entirely on the relationship we build from here forward." I left the house that day as the official legal owner of $350,000 in valuable real estate patrimony. But more important than that, I left with my personal dignity completely intact and my sense of self-esteem totally restored. In the weeks that followed, while my family tried to psychologically process what had happened and adjust to the new permanent financial reality, I was intensely busy executing a sophisticated business strategy I had carefully developed during those long and sleepless nights of planning. First measure, I looked for Jennifer at the hospital and formally asked for her broker brother's professional contact. Robert had 15 solid years of specialized experience in investment properties and an excellent and proven commercial reputation in the Chicago real estate market. "Sarah," he said during our first consulting meeting, "your two properties are located in absolutely excellent geographical areas for investment. Oak Park is an extremely strong and stable rental market, with consistent demand from young professional families. And lakefront properties in Wisconsin are literally gold for the vacation and seasonal rental market." He elaborated a detailed and comprehensive business plan. The house in Oak Park, with its 4 suites and privileged location, could be easily rented for $2,800 monthly to a young family with children. The apartment in Wisconsin, if adequately renovated and modernized, could generate between $1,500 and $3,000 per month, depending on the season, focusing specifically on the lucrative seasonal rental market for tourists and weekend families. With a strategic and well-planned renovation of the apartment, mainly completely updating the kitchen and modernizing the main bathroom, you would be looking at a conservative annual gross income of approximately $45,000 from the two combined properties. $45,000 annually in passive income, practically the exact same amount I had invested saving my parents' mortgage. I immediately hired a specialized property management company to professionally handle all operational aspects, from finding and verifying qualified tenants to preventive maintenance, collections, and problem resolution. For the first time in my life, I would officially be a business real estate investor. The complete renovation of the apartment in Wisconsin took exactly 6 weeks of intensive work and cost precisely $12,000. New kitchen with stainless steel appliances, completely modernized main bathroom, professionally restored original hardwood floors, and a new expansive deck with stunning panoramic lake view. The final result was absolutely spectacular and transformative. Robert was completely right about the market potential. Within just 2 weeks of the total renovation completion, we already had qualified and enthusiastic tenants for the apartment. An executive family from Milwaukee who were specifically looking for a weekend retreat during the summer months, willing to sign a 6-month contract for $2,500 monthly. The house in Oak Park was even easier and faster. A young family with 2 small children instantly fell in love with the property during the first visit and signed a 2-year lease contract for exactly $2,800 monthly. But the real personal and professional satisfaction came 2 months later, when I received and carefully reviewed my first official financial report from the real estate management company. Not only were the properties generating consistent and predictable monthly income, but I had gotten bank approval for favorable financing to buy a third investment property, a charming duplex in Lincoln Square that needed only minor and cosmetic renovations. I was literally building a small, solid, and profitable real estate empire with the money that should have been my legitimate inheritance from the beginning. It was during this productive and exciting period that my mother called again, after almost 2 months of total silence. "Sarah, dear, we need to talk about something important and urgent." "About what specifically?" About the house. We received an official letter from a property management company saying we need to completely vacate the property in exactly 30 days. They had finally discovered the next phase of my plan. "Oh, that," I said casually, as if I were commenting about a minor change in the weather. "Yes, I found absolutely excellent tenants for the house. The Carter family is moving in next month. They have 2 adorable children and are very excited and enthusiastic to permanently establish themselves in the neighborhood." Absolutely total silence from the other side of the phone line. "Sarah," my mother said finally, her voice visibly trembling, "you can't be serious about this. This is our house, our home. We've lived here for more than 20 years. We raised our family here." "It was your house," I corrected gently but firmly. "Now it's officially my legal investment property. And like any responsible and intelligent investor, I'm putting it to generate maximum passive income. But where exactly will we live? How will we find another place? I have absolute certainty that you'll find something adequate and within the available budget. I heard there are some interesting and affordable options in Berwyn and Cicero. Berwyn and Cicero. Significantly more modest and economical neighborhoods than Oak Park, with much more accessible monthly rents for retirees with limited income. "Sarah, you can't legally evict us from our own house," my mother protested with growing desperation. "Technically, it's no longer your house, and technically, I'm not evicting anyone. I'm simply exercising my complete legal rights as the official registered owner." I kept my voice professional and calmly factual. "You have exactly 30 days to find adequate new housing. It's the standard deadline legally required by state law for eviction notification." I could hear agitated and increasingly loud voices in the background. Clearly, she had put the phone on speaker and the whole family was listening to our conversation in real time. "This is pure, cruel, and calculated revenge." It was David's characteristically indignant voice. "You're being deliberately vindictive and malicious." "No, David. Revenge would have been letting you lose the house completely to mortgage foreclosure and be left with absolutely nothing. I saved the property by investing my own money, and now I'm using it intelligently and strategically to generate passive income. It's called responsible real estate investment." "Sarah," my father took control of the phone, his voice loaded with irritated patriarchal authority. "This is absolutely ridiculous and disproportionate. You spent $68,000 just to deliberately get us out of our house? I invested $68,000 to legally acquire 2 extremely valuable properties that now generate substantial monthly passive income for me. It was an excellent and strategic financial investment, actually." "And the apartment in Wisconsin, too?" my mother asked with a voice broken by emotion. "Also rented and generating income. A charming family from Milwaukee is paying $2,500 monthly and taking exceptionally good care of the property. The apartment where we spent all the summers of my childhood and adolescence, where I had worked as a lifeguard for 3 consecutive summers during school vacations to contribute to family expenses, was now generating more money in a single month than I used to earn in an entire season of hard adolescent work." "You planned this entire situation from the beginning," Mark said, his voice full of repressed anger and reluctant admiration. "You deliberately manipulated and orchestrated this whole situation." "I didn't manipulate absolutely anything. You created this specific situation when you consciously decided to cut me from the family inheritance. I just responded appropriately and proportionally to your actions." I made a deliberate pause. "Actually, I should sincerely thank all of you. If you hadn't made that original decision, I never would have discovered how extraordinarily lucrative and satisfying the real estate investment market can be. Sarah, for the love of Almighty God, we are your blood family," my mother desperately pleaded. You are my family when you need urgent money, I responded calmly. When it came to inheritance and recognition, I apparently wasn't important enough family. We can resolve this amicably, my father tried to negotiate with a conciliatory tone. We can go back to the original will, divide everything equally among the 3 children as it should have been from the beginning. Dad, that ship has already sailed a long time ago and is in the middle of the ocean. You had entire months to make the correct and fair decision the first time. You deliberately chose not to do it. So you're really going to leave us homeless? Without a house? David asked with incredulity. You won't be literally homeless. You'll rent a residence like millions of other American families do every month. It will be a valuable educational experience about real financial responsibility and living within your own means. The call ended abruptly with more screaming, accusations, and empty threats. I hung up the phone calmly and returned to my normal work routine, checking the monthly financial reports of my growing investment properties. 2 weeks later, I received an official call from Mr. Harrison, the family lawyer. Sarah, your parents formally approached me to explore all possible legal options against your recent actions. And what was your professional analysis? And I explained in detail that absolutely everything was executed within the strictest legality. The will was voluntarily changed by them, without any legal coercion or illicit pressure. The mortgage payment was an undocumented and non-reimbursable financial gift. And as the legal registered owner of the properties, you have absolute and unquestionable right to rent them to whomever you wish. Thank you for the legal confirmation. Sarah, he continued hesitantly, may I speak off the record for a personal moment? Of course. In 40 complete years of specialized legal practice, I have rarely witnessed such a complete and definitive family turnaround. Your parents are obviously emotionally devastated, but honestly, after hearing the entire detailed story and historical context, I perfectly understand your actions and motivations. Thank you for the understanding. Just one professional and personal question. Do you really intend to maintain this situation indefinitely? Mr. Harrison, my parents had literally decades to choose to treat their 3 children equally and fairly. They consciously chose not to do it. My brothers had a complete entire decade of adult life to become truly independent and responsible. They chose not to do it. Now all of them will finally learn about real and permanent consequences of irresponsible decisions. The process of my family's move was an intense family drama in 3 distinct acts. First, they desperately tried to find a similar house in Oak Park or surrounding neighborhoods to rent, quickly and painfully discovering that rental prices were far beyond my parents' limited retirement budget. Second, Mark was forced to finally look for real and stable employment for the first time in his adult life, when he realized there would be no more free rooms available in the family house. He got a part-time position at a local gym for $10 an hour. It wasn't much money, but it represented a responsible beginning. David tried a different personal approach. He showed up at my workplace for a face-to-face conversation. Sarah, can we talk privately for a few minutes? I was leaving my shift after a particularly long and exhausting day, and really didn't have the mood or energy for additional family drama, but I agreed to talk briefly in the hospital parking lot. Look, he began with a conciliatory tone, I recognize that things got completely out of control. We all made serious errors in judgment. Errors? I repeated carefully. David, you didn't accidentally forget to buy me a birthday present. You deliberately excluded me from the family inheritance after years of financial support. It was a terrible and unfair decision. We all completely recognize that now. Now that you discovered you need something concrete from me, you recognize. Sarah, Mom, and Dad are truly devastated. They sold half the old family furniture to manage to pay the security deposit for an apartment in Cicero. Cicero, Sarah, you know well that neighborhood's reputation. Cicero was definitely a significant social and economic downgrade compared to Oak Park, but it also represented exactly what they could realistically afford with the limited retirement income they had available. David, you systematically lived beyond your real financial means for many years at my personal expense. Now you're being forced to live within the genuine means you have. That's how financial life works for the vast majority of responsible people. So that's it? You're just going to watch your own family sink financially. You're not sinking at all. You're finally learning to live as completely responsible and independent adults. It's an educational lesson that should have happened many years ago. David became visibly red with contained anger. Do you realize what kind of person this makes you? What specific kind? The cruel kind that deliberately abandons their own biological family because of money. That accusation hit me like an emotional slap. Not because of the pain it caused, but because of the absolutely perfect historical irony. "David," I said with unshakable calm, "you literally abandoned me from the family because of money a few months ago. The only fundamental difference is that when I do it, I honestly call it fair and deserved consequences. When you did it, you euphemistically called it a responsible family decision." He was completely without articulated response to that observation. "Besides," I continued calmly, "I didn't abandon you at all. You're still my biological family and always will be. You're simply no longer my permanent financial dependence." David left without saying another word. And that was the last direct and personal attempt at reconciliation or negotiation. In the months that followed, occasionally I heard fragmentary news through mutual acquaintances and colleagues about how my family was gradually adapting to the new permanent financial reality. The information reached me indirectly, through old neighbors, work colleagues who knew my family, and even some hospital clients who casually mentioned having seen my parents or brothers. Mark had managed to be promoted from part-time employee to shift supervisor at the local gym where he worked. Apparently, he was demonstrating leadership and responsibility skills that no one knew existed. He was sharing a modest but clean apartment with a responsible coworker, and rumors indicated he was even systematically saving money for the first time in his adult life. David had finally managed to establish some fixed corporate clients for his graphic design services and was living independently in a small but functional studio in Logan Square. According to reliable sources, he was earning more consistent money than he had ever earned in his life, simply because he was forced to treat his work as a real business instead of a creative hobby funded by his parents. My parents, in turn, had permanently settled in the two-bedroom apartment in Cicero. It was significantly smaller and more modest than the spacious house where they had spent 2 decades. But it was clean, safe, located near public transportation, and most importantly, it was completely within the limited retirement budget they had available. The most fascinating and revealing aspect of this entire transformation was discovering that, forced to live rigorously within their real financial means, all members of my family were finally experiencing genuine personal growth as truly responsible and independent adults. Who could imagine that forced financial independence could be so educational and transformative? Meanwhile, my own real estate portfolio continued growing steadily and profitably. With the predictable monthly income from the 2 original properties, I had gotten bank approval for additional financing for a 3rd investment property, then a 4th, and eventually a 5th. Within 18 complete months, I owned and managed 5 different rental properties, generating solid, consistent, and substantial income. Jennifer at the hospital frequently joked that I was rapidly transforming into a local real estate magnate. It wasn't quite an accurate description yet, but for the first time in my entire adult life, I had true robust financial security and total and complete economic independence. 18 months after that fateful dinner that changed absolutely everything, my life had transformed in a completely unrecognizable way. I now owned and managed a real estate portfolio of 6 different properties, had a substantial and constantly growing savings account, and for the first time was seriously considering reducing my intensive hospital workload to dedicate more time and energy to my expanding real estate investments. The historical irony didn't go unnoticed by me for even a moment. By trying to punish me specifically for being too independent, my family had inadvertently forced me to become truly and completely independent permanently. It was on a sunny Saturday afternoon, while I was quietly reviewing detailed financial proposals for a potential 7th property, that I received a completely unexpected and surprising phone call. It was my mother again, but her voice sounded dramatically different from any tone I had heard before. Not desperate, like in the other emergency calls, nor condescending like in the old days. It sounded genuinely humble, reflective, and mature. "Sarah, I know perfectly that you probably don't want to talk to me after everything that happened, but I need to say some important things that have been in my heart for months." "I'm listening carefully," I responded, genuinely curious, despite myself. "First and most important, I want to apologize sincerely and deeply. Not because we want something specific from you now, but because I finally realized and recognized how completely wrong and unfair we were with you for so many years." She made a long and significant pause. "We spent these last entire months trying to honestly understand how we got to this situation, and the simple and painful truth is that we were systematically unfair to you for decades. This was genuinely unexpected and surprising. Second, I want you to know that your brothers, well, they have grown and matured tremendously. Mark was promoted to assistant manager at the gym and is responsibly saving money to buy his own apartment next year. David got 3 important and stable corporate clients and is earning more consistent money than he has ever earned in his entire life. I'm genuinely happy to know that, I responded, and realized with surprise that I really was. And third, her voice became noticeably lower and more emotional. I want you to know that we are all deeply proud of you. We were always proud, but we never expressed it adequately or sufficiently. You built an absolutely incredible personal and professional life, and now you've built an impressive and successful business. You achieved all this completely on your own, with your own work and determination, and that is extraordinary and admirable. I felt an unexpected and powerful emotion rising in my throat, catching me completely off guard. Thank you, Mom. That means a lot to me. I'm not calling to ask for absolutely anything. I'm not expecting you to forgive us immediately, or to change anything in the decisions you made. I just wanted you to know for certain that we completely understand now, and that we love you deeply, regardless of everything. After I hung up calmly, I stood looking thoughtfully through the wide window of my apartment for a long and contemplative time. Part of me, a small but persistent and nostalgic part, genuinely missed the family we used to be. Or maybe, more honestly, the family I always thought and hoped we were. But a significantly larger and more realistic part of me knew with absolute certainty that the fundamental changes that happened were not only necessary, but beneficial for everyone involved. Not just for me personally, but for each individual member of our family. 2 months after that revealing conversation, I found Mark completely by chance at the local Whole Foods. He was shopping for fresh ingredients for what seemed to be an elaborate and healthy meal, and I couldn't help but smile discreetly while observing his serious and focused concentration, examining organic vegetables and high-quality proteins. "Sarah," he said when he finally saw me, and to my genuine surprise, he seemed sincerely and spontaneously happy with the casual encounter. "How are you? You look great." "I'm fine, thank you," I responded honestly. "And you? I heard through mutual acquaintances that you were recently promoted." "Yes, assistant operations manager now. It's significantly more work and responsibility than I initially imagined, but I'm enjoying it much more than I ever expected." He smiled with genuine pride. Who could imagine that I had natural aptitude for administration and leadership? "Are you living completely independently now? Still sharing an apartment with a responsible coworker, but we're both looking for separate individual apartments for next year." "I really want and need my own personal space, you know?" He made a reflective pause. "It's fascinating and revealing. I had never consciously realized how much I really enjoyed independence and autonomy until I was forced to experience and develop it." We talked for several minutes about completely banal and normal subjects: respective work, weekend plans, the unusually pleasant weather. It was surprisingly natural and comfortable, as if we were simply two responsible adults who knew each other casually, without all the heavy family emotional baggage from the past. "Sarah," he said carefully before we said goodbye, "I know I don't have the moral right to say this, but thank you. Thank you specifically for what? For forcing us collectively to grow and mature. It was painful and difficult at the time, but it was absolutely necessary and transformative." A few weeks later, David sent me a short but significant email. "Sarah, I know we haven't communicated in a long time, but I wanted to share important news. I got my first 6-figure contract for a large-scale corporate advertising campaign. It's the biggest project of my entire career. An honest part of me recognizes that this never would have happened if I were still living comfortably in the financial dependence zone that you used to inadvertently provide for our family. I'm not asking for forgiveness or trying to force reconciliation. I just wanted you to know that your actions had profound and lasting positive consequences, even though that might not have been your original intention. I sincerely hope you are well and prosperous. David." These small interactions and communications made me reflect deeply on what had really happened during this transformative period. Yes, I had acted initially motivated by legitimate anger and justified indignation. Yes, there was definitely a vindictive component in my initial decisions, but the unexpected final result was that all of us, including my parents, had been forced to face important realities we were avoiding or denying for years. Today, 3 complete years after that fateful family dinner that permanently changed our lives, I can say with absolute honesty that I don't regret for even a moment the choices I made. I have a solid and profitable real estate portfolio that provides me genuine financial security, a career I continue loving passionately at the hospital, and for the first time in my entire adult life, family relationships that are based on mutual respect and healthy independence instead of toxic financial dependence. My parents completely adapted to life in Cicero, and without the constant financial pressure of subsidizing dependent adult children, they even managed to make some small but significant trips they always wanted and planned. Mark proudly bought his own apartment last year and is seriously dating a competent colleague from the gym. David substantially expanded his design business and hired 2 talented part-time employees. Occasionally, we meet at mandatory family events, important birthdays, major holidays, and the interactions are consistently cordial, respectful, and even genuinely affectionate. But there's a tacit understanding, unverbalized but mutually comprehended, that the old destructive patterns of financial dependence and unequal treatment ended permanently forever. Some well-meaning people periodically ask me if I plan to eventually forgive my family and restore their original inheritance rights. The question always amuses me internally because it incorrectly presupposes that I'm still acting primarily out of anger, resentment, or desire for revenge. The truth is significantly simpler and more mature. I built a personal life and profitable business based on the decisions they made voluntarily. These properties are no longer traditional family inheritance. They are my legitimate investments, acquired with my own hard work and my own saved money, generating substantial income that allows me to live exactly the life I always wanted and deserved. Maybe many years from now, when my own inevitable time comes to make a personal will, I'll surprise everyone with unexpected generosity and egalitarian inclusion. Or maybe I'll decide differently. The fundamental and important difference is that now this will be exclusively my personal choice, based on the relationship we build progressively from here forward, not on automatic family obligations and unquestioned expectations from the past. For now, I'm completely satisfied and at peace knowing that each member of our family finally learned to assume total responsibility for their own life. And that, ironically, by trying to teach me about independence through arbitrary exclusion from inheritance, my family inadvertently gave me the greatest possible gift, the absolute motivation and necessary determination to build my own substantial wealth and achieve true lasting independence. Sometimes, I discovered, the best revenge is simply living extraordinarily well and definitively proving that you never needed them as much as they always needed you.